So the White House was in court yesterday arguing about whether or not they had the right to remove these gang members, rapists and murderers. And President Trump made it very clear he wasn't happy. He posted on Truth Social that he didn't want vicious, violent, demented criminals in our country. And that he noted that this radical left lunatic of a judge, a troublemaker and an agitator who was appointed by Obama, was not elected president. Like, Trump has an obligation to keep us safe. That's the fundamental goal of any leader in a democracy, is to keep their people safe, whether at the local, state, or federal level. It's unbelievable that we're dealing with this. But it just shows you how nuts the left is in the media. Do you want to be the people that fight to keep rapists and murderers coming back to the country? Good for you. All right, guys, big Tuesday, big Tuesday for you. I feel like we say this every week, but it just never did. I mean, people could say, how long can he keep going? 3 more years? It's going to happen. He's not going to slow down. He had an epic meeting at the Kennedy Center yesterday. And it's interesting because we talked about it on the morning meeting this morning. I don't think people fully appreciate the fact that this isn't about just touring the Kennedy Center or having a meeting over there. Two things stand out to me. Number one, he personally actually loves the arts. You read these stories about him playing DJ at Mar-a-Lago, and it's not just playing DJ like he's having fun on his iPad. He loves the music, the artistry, the culture of it all. He also loves old movies, and he loves to talk about act. I mean, like, he actually embraces this. And then the other thing that I think is important is, for too long, conservatives have just ceded the ground. Oh, we'll let Hollywood be Hollywood. You remember the first term, Trump just didn't go to the Kennedy Center at all. They let them have their stupid awards dinners and all this stuff. And I think there's a recognition that, wait, why are we doing this? Why are we seeding all of this? We won. We're in charge. We get to appoint all these people. He named himself president, chairman of the Kennedy Center. Why should we sit back and cede the ground to the left and allow them to continue to give out all their awards and recognize people who hate us? We won the election. He won the election. Let him lead the way. I love this. Big talk with Putin today. I think the president, for all the stuff on the left, by the way, it's funny. Did Biden have a conversation in 4 years about stopping this? It was Biden that allowed this, remember. That failed Afghanistan withdrawal gave Putin the idea that, hey, maybe I can go in and just take land. I didn't do it for 4 years under Trump. Maybe we should actually appreciate a guy who's trying to end a war, both in Hamas and in Ukraine. It's just, it's blowing my mind. I brought this up yesterday, by the way. Chuck Schumer had a horrible weekend after caving on the CR. And it wasn't that he caved. He made the right decision, by the way. They had no choice. But he screwed with their strategy. He told them they were going to fight, and then the next day, halfway up the hill, said, hey, let's retreat. I get why Democrats are pissed. Rightly so. They charged the hill. They thought, oh, here we go, Chucky, we're with you. And then Chuck said, hey, I got to go. Bye. You're on your own. We're caving. He should have just been straight. This isn't our fight to have. We got to keep the government open. And yet he made all these other Democrats charge the hill and then left them right out there. They're pissed. Anyway, I said this yesterday. This book tour was going to be a disaster. And what happened? Cha-ching. Canceled the book tour. Or as he likes to say, postponed it. Well, I did a favor. I looked it up, by the way. It's his book, which debuts today. It's on anti-Semitism, which I'll get to in a second. It's called Anti-Semitism in America, A Warning. A warning, okay? So his publisher's probably pissed because he's not doing the book tour. He was scheduled to participate in promotional events in Atlanta, Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and New York, as well as a few stops in California, according to the New York Times. These are all friendly venues. They're big urban cities. This is where he should be loving life, but he couldn't do it. He said that the book tour was being rescheduled over security concerns. Security concerns? He has a big detail. What are you scared of, Chuck? Not the right, your own people. Right now, according to Amazon, it's 1,237. Not too good for a guy who's got a massive email list and a massive platform. But also, let's be honest with you. Like, the book is about anti-Semitism. He's Jewish. But he's sided with these Palestinian sympathizers who are pretty much the antithesis of anti-Semitic. They're going after Jewish people for being Jewish. They're committing acts of violence. destruction. So you want to write a book and profit off anti-Semitism, and yet every time you get a chance, you side with the Palestinians. The same people who took innocent civilians hostage and killed them, babies and children. And then you want to write a book about anti-Semitism and profit from it? What the heck is going on? Smart move canceling the tour. It was unbelievable. And then let's get into the subject of these judges. So the White House was in court yesterday arguing about whether or not they had the right to remove these gang members, rapists and murderers. And the judges are getting upset. Steve Bannon, not holding back, talking about how it's time that these judges, like this judge in D.C., James Bozeman, who halted all the flights with the Venezuelan gang members from Trinidad Agua. Like, you know, Bannon's basically saying, hey, let's impeach these guys. Why are we sitting back? Use the tools. This is what the Constitution allows for. And President Trump made it very clear he wasn't happy. He posted on Truth Social that he didn't want vicious, violent, demented criminals in our country. And that he noted that this radical left lunatic of a judge, a troublemaker and an agitator who was appointed by Obama, was not elected president. Like, Trump has an obligation to keep us safe. That's the fundamental goal of any leader in a democracy, is to keep their people safe, whether at the local, state, or federal level. It's unbelievable that we're dealing with this. But it just shows you how nuts the left is in the media. They're like, President Trump, what, are you following the judge's order? Well, they actually feel very good on the legal grounds, because they're like, the written order was actually issued after the planes left U.S. airspace, so it had no jurisdiction. Do you want to be the people that fight to keep rapists and murderers coming back to the country? Good for you. I mentioned the Kennedy files are coming down today. It's going to be an interesting day on whether this just is an indictment on the government, or if this actually reveals, more stuff about the grassy knoll. My 2 cents, this is just about the government. President Trump was also speaking with Putin today, a big deal in that effort to end the war. He also yesterday, check this out, he canceled the Secret Service detail for Ashley and Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden is off crying poor in South Africa in a $500 a night suite of some sort, crying, I can't pay my bills, I can't do this, with full Secret Service protection. President Trump nixed it. Unbelievable. But I want to show you this clip because this is where the media's head is right now. They're all about citing, the president, oh my God, he used this 200-year-old alien sedition act. And, is that right? So this is how Tom Homan answered the question. Check it out.
You say to those who claim you're using a 200-year-old law to circumvent due process?
An old law? Not as old as the Constitution. We still pay attention to that, don't we?
But some would say this is...
How many more times do you...
Some would say, actually, it doesn't matter how old the law is. In fact, it was used in the 1950s, 1960s. That doesn't matter. If the law is the law, it doesn't matter when it passed. Oh, you're still citing the First Amendment? The First Amendment, man, that was passed 200 years ago. This is how moronic the media is, though. You're using a 200-year-old law. Which laws? When do they time out, guys? Is that because they love to cite the First Amendment? That's a little bit older, isn't it? Why should they cite the First Amendment? That's really old. Unbelievable. That's where it's at. By the way, news last night that was kind of interesting before I get to Brendan Carr, our amazing guest, to talk about all things going after the media, holding them accountable, big tech accountable. Great conversation with him. President last night announced all of the service academies. He rounded out his appointment of the Naval Academy. As you know, I was honored to join that first 4 group that he put out. But last night, he also announced that Senator Tim Sheehy, Navy SEAL from Montana, will be joining. Myself, Ronnie Jackson, Derek Van Orden, and his personal aide, Walt Nalta. And then Earl Earhart from Georgia will also be joining. Then he announced the Board of Visitors for the West Point. Major General David Belavia, Lieutenant General Dan Warhoth, General Michael Flynn, Congressman Wesley Hunt, Maureen Bannon, who is Steve's daughter, a captain, Army captain, Megan Mops, who is General Kellogg's daughter, all West Point grads, pretty amazing. They will make our country proud, he said. And then he also announced the board of the Air Force Academy, Board of Visitors, composed of a gentleman named Doug Niccioli, Dan Clark, Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama, where Space Force may or may not end up, by the way. Charlie Kirk, Dina Powell. He announced it all last night, rounding out those Service Academy appointments. But you notice he announced all of them. Why? Because he was able to dismiss all of the Biden appointees. Why? Spicer v. Biden. Biden created that first historical precedent of firing all the Trump appointees for no reason. And then Trump used that precedent to fire all of his, allowing him to name an entire new board for each one of the service academies. By the way, yesterday was Dan Bongino's first day as deputy director of the FBI. Congratulations, Dan. It's great to see him over there working with Kash Patel at the FBI. I'm excited for what's to come. All right, Brendan Carr, the chairman of the FCC, is on his way. But before I get to that, if you run a business or are the person in charge of the financing, and I'm talking if the company is 5 to 5,000 employees, then you need to get one of these. This is a ramp card, okay? It looks like a regular physical Visa card, except it will change your life and how your company does business. If you go to ramp.com /Spicer, you will sign up right now and you will use in about 15 minutes, you can get going. They issue virtual and physical cards. And what this does is it cuts down so much time that your company, your employees, and your finance team spend chasing receipts and reconciling statements. It literally, according to one of the guests, I switched over my company. I know one of the guests that came on told me he had a similar experience. It changes everything, though. It literally streamlines. It gives, it handles everything from receipt matching to categorization, approvals. You can set limits on your employees, what they can buy, what they can't, how much. It's so cool. This will make the CFO's day so much brighter, so much more efficient. Ramp is a free corporate card. It integrates right into your existing systems and tracks every one of these transactions. It offers white glove concierge onboarding to make it so simple. It's unbelievable. And for a limited time right now, listeners of this show can get $250 in their pocket. So if you're the person, get yourself the money. Even if you're not the owner, if you're just in charge of this stuff, you get the $250. Just go to ramp.com /Spicer, ramp.com /Spicer. Cards are issued by Sutton Bank, members FDIC, terms and conditions apply. All right, guys, we've heard crazy stories about what the IRS can do if you get an audit or if you get that phone call. They are the world's largest collection agency in the world, and they mean business. When they call you or send you a pay-up notice, this is not something that I would advise you to go at alone. Bad things happen when that occurs. You need professional help. So whether you have unfiled returns or back taxes that you owe, never contact the IRS alone. Turn it over to professionals. I think the best in the business are the folks at Tax Network USA, because these guys have the experience, the know-how, and the connections. They know who to call and who not to. They know which agents at the IRS will play ball and work with you and which ones to stay away from and to avoid. That's critical. You know who you're going to get, right? They do. And they've got these preferred lines to get through right now, and it's becoming harder and harder with all the cutbacks to figure out how to get through and who to get through. These guys have proven strategies that are designed to settle your tax problems in your favor, and they've recovered over $1 billion for their clients. So whether you owe $10 or $10 million or have unfiled taxes or unpaid, for once and for all, get ahead of the situation and call the folks at Tax Network. Go to call 1-800-905-8000 or go to tnusa.com /Sean Spicer. Full name there, right? TN, Tax Network, USA.com /Sean Spicer. One word, like Madonna, but Sean Spicer. And it's SEANSPICER. Once again, tnusa.com /Sean Spicer. All right, without further ado, I want to bring in the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, Brendan Carr. Chairman Carr, great to see you again.
Yeah, so good to be with you, Sean. Thanks for having me back on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, so look, I saw on social media you got a nice ride back to D.C. from Florida the other day. That's got to have been pretty cool. Had you been on Air Force One before?
You know, actually, that's my very first time ever on Air Force One. So what an incredible life experience. I was down at Mar-a-Lago over the weekend, got to spend some time with the president. He was gracious enough to offer me a ride back to D.C. Sunday night. And man, that was just such an experience getting on board that thing. Unbelievable.
So I'm just curious, how did that work? Where you're like, hey, I'm here in Florida, I'm heading back to D.C., or did he just say, hey, Chairman, you want to ride back with me on my plane?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, obviously, the president, he's unbelievably gracious and hospitable. But I was with him this week, and he was down there and won his club championship down there. So I got to see him do that. The guy's an incredible
Really?
golfer. And I don't know if you ever got to spend time with him there, but we were down there at his course. It was a really good time. And then got to, obviously a lot of other folks were down there over the weekend. We were working on different initiatives. So it was a lot of fun.
And just so out of curiosity, when you're on the plane, is there anything that you thought? I mean, I think it's pretty cool. Like I got obviously the honor of flying on it when I was press secretary. Yeah. But is there anything that to me, it's always like after watching the movies, you're like, wow, I didn't realize this. I mean, so is there something that you thought was kind of cool that you saw that was interesting?
Yeah, look, it's amazing. I mean, you pull up, as you know, in that motorcade and the lights are on the airplane and, you're seeing for the first time Air Force One, such an iconic symbol of America. And you get on board and they took me up to the top deck where the pilots were and you walk into the cockpit area. There's an awful lot of dials and buttons up there, right? So modern day aircraft, they've got like a screen and that's it. But this airplane still has that, old school buttons and dials everywhere being, twisted and turned. So it was a pretty remarkable experience.
Yeah, it's funny because the first time I flew on Air Force One, I actually knew the pilot and the co-pilot very well. It's a whole long story. So it's a really cool experience. I'm glad you got to do that. I want to start our conversation off by giving people an understanding of what does the FCC have control over and doesn't it? Because sometimes people will see something on like cable news and say, why isn't the FCC going after that? So can you just kind of set the table for us and explain what does the FCC have jurisdiction over and what doesn't it?
Yeah, the media area in particular is really interesting, and I'll get into the weeds on that. But just as a general matter, obviously, we do a lot on the satellite side where we're trying to sort of encourage this next generation of low Earth orbit satellites, we call it. Most people think of Starlink, but there's other technologies that we're trying to get going too, including Amazon Kuiper. Hopefully they get up and off the ground soon, but that's really expanding connectivity. It's, pennies on the dollar compared to other sort of internet infrastructure builds. So we do a lot there. We do a lot on the 5G, 6G side. So your smartphone, I mean, most people just turn the phone on if they think about it at all. Maybe they think it's magic or pixie dust, but it uses these airwaves, this invisible spectrum, and we have to make sure there's enough of it out there. And that's sort of a constant battle. We have funding programs where we're building out rural broadband infrastructure. But in the media space in particular, I think probably the way that people should understand it is sort of different levels of potential FCC regulation. Our zenith, our high point of regulation has to do with local television and radio broadcasters. Now, most people think of ABC, CBS, and NBC, but they're actual programmers. So separate those in your mind. There's national programmers, ABC, NBC, CBS. They affiliate, enter into agreements with the actual licensed local broadcasters to get their content out. And oftentimes they end up being this, Hollywood or New York foie gras that's sort of shoved down and out through these local broadcasters. But they're the ones, the local broadcasters we regulate. There's cable channels. So that's what, CNN is and MSNBC. And the FCC has sort of a lighter regulatory role there. There's some rules on discrimination that apply there, but it's not the same as with licensed broadcast TV stations. And then finally, you have sort of the largely up to now unregulated space of whether it's social media or over the top online content. There's very, very little FCC regulation there. So it's sort of a cascade of authorities. And one of the things that I've said is we need to reinvigorate the FCC's enforcement of the public interest standard. Again, that's what applies to those local television broadcasters. For years or decades, the FCC effectively, walked away from that public interest obligation. And I've told people we're going to vigorously enforce it. If there's broadcasters out there, radio or TV, that don't like being held accountable for their public interest standard, what I've told them is the FCC's address is 45 L Street Northeast. They can turn their license in and we can find a higher valued use to it. But for each of the different sectors of the media, we're going to apply the law as intended by Congress.
So obviously, I think the ones that have the public airways, the CBS, the ABCs, and the NBCs, I want to start with those for a second because I know President Trump has made a big deal out of things like CBS, for example, the way that they conducted that interview with Kamala Harris and they edited it or whatever. What is the public interest there? In other words, what's limits say CBS from just saying, hey, we get to air what we want, freedom of speech, First Amendment, then what we all know we have seen now is that they clearly gave a favorable edited interview to make her look in the best light. Where's the line between what the government can and can't say in a situation like that?
Right. So to your point, CBS aired that 60 Minutes episode on broadcast television. So again, for people's minds, if there was an interview on Fox News, again, a cable channel, the particular policy at issue here wouldn't apply. The policy here is for a licensed broadcaster. There's something at the FCC called the news distortion policy. Now, it's a very narrow doctrine at the end of the day. It's probably not of the same sweep as most average people would think about it as. So the prototypical news distortion case at the FCC is where a broadcaster, for instance, would take the yes answer that an elected official gave to one question and a no answer that they gave to a different one and swap the two answers, make it look like they said something entirely different. That's the easiest news distortion complaint. And right now there's a very live debate in the FCC's record about whether the 60 Minutes edit qualifies as news distortion, or to your point, is it legitimate editing? And we've been hearing very robustly from people on that. It's a live issue. We haven't finally adjudicated it, but for my part, there's obviously a tremendous amount of concerns that have been raised. There are parties in the record that are saying the edit went far beyond just sort of editing for length or clarity or conciseness, that there was sort of a fundamental change that was taking place. We're looking at all of those arguments, and we're going to see how it plays out.
Yesterday, the president was at the Kennedy Center. He took a question from NBC. This is how he responded. Take a listen.
Who are you with?
Sir, I'm with NBC.
Oh, that's the same one. I don't want to talk to NBC anymore. I think you're so discredited.
Mr. President.
So the question I have for you is, look, the president can choose not to engage with any network or any outlet that he wants. But are there FCC concerns about any of the other networks, how they're operating? There's obviously a big difference between not politically liking somebody and whether or not they're complying with the law.
Look, if you step back, the trust in this legacy national news media, NBC included, is really at an all-time low. And that's not just my view. Jeff Bezos did an op-ed not that long ago where he said for years, at least, the media, the national legacy media, could say they were more trusted than Congress. And now they've fallen even deeper behind Congress. So, something has to change right now. I mean, the national news media has done it to themselves. People don't trust them. They're constantly exposed for running stories that turn out not to be true. And so I think that for their own business reasons, they really need to right this ship. I mean, you look at MSNBC in particular and some of the content that's coming out there, it's no wonder why their ratings are just absolutely in the tank. I mean, I've said before that I've got more trust and faith in gas station sushi than the stuff that's coming out of MSNBC right now. And I think CBS is no different. I mean, they had a story not that long ago trying to sort of make some sort of analogy between Irish immigrants on St. Patrick's Day and President Trump's, rightful action to remove criminal gangs from this country. I mean, it's just absolutely unbelievable. It's not good for the country. And again, at the FCC, we're going to start reinvigorating this public interest standard because something needs to change with the way the legacy media is operating.
So what about the taxpayer finance stuff? Like there's Voice of America, NPR, PBS. Where do you guys, is there a difference between those three entities in terms of your jurisdiction?
Yeah, so a lot of that activity, Voice of America, Carrie Lake's doing a fantastic job. That sort of comes under the jurisdiction of the agency that she's working at. With respect to NPR and PBS, so remember, as you indicated, these are non-commercial stations. So not only do they have the regular public interest standard obligation that all broadcasters are supposed to comply with, it's sort of doubly so because they have this non-commercial status for which they get special benefits under our regulation. So what that means is they can't run commercials. But if you ever sort of watch PBS or NPR, they have what they're calling underwriting. And underwriting sponsorship is allowed under our rules. But there's been concerns raised that their underwriting has crossed the line into commercials. And so we launched an investigation into NPR and PBS. We're taking a look at their member stations as well to determine if they've been running illegally commercials. But it ties into a broader debate, I think, about funding of NPR and PBS that's taking place in Congress right now. For my own part, I don't see a reason why 100% of the American taxpayer needs to subsidize NPR and PBS content. Again, particularly if they're able to run commercials, that's fine. And similarly, you got all these celebrities out there that are selling their cars to fund NPR and PBS, Sheryl Crow most famously. And again, my view is that people should put their money where their mouth is. If they love that PBS or NPR content, they should feel free to sell their cars and finance it. But why are we compelling, the average American that doesn't listen to that stuff to fund their operations? It doesn't really make sense to me.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I guess the question I have, the more I think about it, is if you had your perfect wish, would it be that NPR and PBS just stop getting taxpayer money, which I wholeheartedly support? Or should it also be that we just sell them off? I mean, why in this day and age, with the internet being what it is and the opportunities to get information from so many places, do we still need to do that? Why not let them have commercials, but sell them off, have the public, reap the financial windfall of selling off those stations?
Yeah, look, I think step one, in my own view, is to stop funding this, because once they then are subject to market conditions, market constraints, I think that could be a very good thing. Because when you're subsidized heavily by the federal government, we see this with agencies across the board, there's a lot of inefficiencies. But if we made sure that NPR were responsive to the market, were disciplined by the market, I think that could be a very good thing for their own business model going forward. So I'm open to that. But unless and until I think that federal funding is eliminated, they're able to engage in conduct that is different than what the average listeners would demand.
You guys took action against YouTube TV, and it's actually interesting because when you look at the YouTube TV lineup, there's really not a lot of conservative stuff there. And I know that you guys, and you in particular, Chairman, expressed a concern about some of the faith-based programming. Now, they're a private company owned by Google. Where's the line between them being able to make decisions and them discriminating?
Yeah. So when you look at a lot of these sort of social media companies, big tech companies, a lot of them have really sort of made some good moves recently towards embracing free speech, embracing diversity of opinion. Obviously, X was already there. Facebook, Meta, recently, Mark Zuckerberg has indicated that he's re-embracing it. Google is one that I don't think has quite embraced sort of this return in America to this free speech tradition. Obviously, YouTube is free to make business decisions. The concerns that were raised at the FCC, though, was that they weren't doing that instead that they had some sort of secret, undisclosed policy to discriminate against faith-based programming. And that's what we're looking at. There's also, a live debate at the FCC, as we were talking about, which is, do we take YouTube TV, which is effectively an internet platform, and apply some of the regulations that we've applied to cable providers, including ones that go to in a broad sense to discrimination or not? So there's that debate playing out at the FCC. Do we extend those regulations or not? And so my investigation there on YouTube TV is to try to get a better understanding of what happened. Is there a secret policy to discriminate against faith-based organizations? That would be concerning if there was, and if there is, they should at least be public about it. But then we'll look at that as to whether there's a market failure that might justify some additional regulation by the FCC.
So is that initiative a Brendan Carr-led thing, or is that something that the other commissioners share a concern about?
Yeah, this particular one is mine. I mean, they may very well be concerned about it. The FCC, as you know, is traditionally 5 commissioners, one of which is chair. We're usually 3 members of the president's party, 2 not. Right now, we're 2-2, so 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. So this is an initiative that I'm running through our bureau. So as the chair, you appoint the leadership in the bureau level, and they're responsive to what the chair wants. And so that's how the agency functions.
And is YouTube responsive to your concerns, or are they saying, we're a private company, stay out of our business?
Yeah, I expect that they're going to respond. I don't think the deadline for them responding yet has come to pass. I think I saw them say something in the public already that they were going to respond and sort of explain the decision making. And I look forward to hearing from them on that.
Yeah, me too. Hey, you guys launched this initiative that I'm intrigued by, where you call it delete, delete, delete. I want to explain what that means and how comprehensive it is.
We're looking soup to nuts. Basically every single FCC rule or regulation should be on the table, because you have ones that, had an original purpose that made sense, and the original purpose goes away, but it nonetheless stays on the books. And one of the things that President Trump, ran on and his promise in this agenda of his administration is that we're going to end this regulatory onslaught from Washington. There's obviously lots of regulations we need and want. There's at least a small handful that I'll be putting into place, but there's a massive deregulatory effort we have to do. President Trump has told every agency to go for a 10-to-1 initiative, meaning delete 10 regulations for every 1 new one. So it's not a no regulation, but in proportion, we are going to be cutting a tremendous amount of red tape. And so that's what this proceeding is designed to do, is to focus everybody in at the FCC, put all of your great ideas in there. We're going to get rid of every single rule and regulation that we don't need. And I think it's just going to help unleash, even greater economic prosperity across the country. I mean, people feel so much more positive and upbeat in the country right now. I think some of that is the free speech stuff that President Trump's been pushing and that we've been pushing, but this economic stuff as well. I mean, this is really going to add some rocket fuel once we just get rid of all those old webs of regulations that have been slowing people down.
You know what caught my eye, though, is there's a law firm in D.C. that President Trump targeted a little while ago with respect to their security clearances because of the role that they had in the Steele dossier. The firm's called Perkins Coie, and they put out a tweet. Like the law firm put out a tweet, and it said FCC Chairman Brendan Carr launched a new proceeding to review and potentially eliminate undue regulatory burdens. The public notice outlined several areas where feedback would be particularly valuable. We discussed in this update. Now, in a perfect world, you would say, wow, that's very nice of them. I have a feeling this is their way of saying, hey, hire us because we want to protect the deep state. I mean, like that to me, it's like it's like you need a DC translator ring where you're like, okay, what that really means is, hey, hire us because we're going to fight this, attempt to delete these regulations on your behalf. Was that how you saw that?
Well, I always welcomed your point, Perkins Coie or anybody highlighting FCC proceedings to help get them on more people's radar. But one of the things we're trying to do is sort of just cut out the middlemen as a general matter. That's why, for instance, on going back to the CBS news distortion complaint, we publicly put out for comment. We asked everybody to participate. We put the transcript out there of the actual interview, the video itself. We want everyday people to see this information, to file in the FCCs, to participate. For too long, and this is part of why we have so many complex regulations, is you needed to have these, sophisticated middlemen to help the average Joe, the average business navigate in Washington. But if we can sort of cut out all of that unnecessary rules, then, maybe everyday people, and this would be a shock, I know, can actually understand what the government is doing. And so our goal is to make sure that we don't need middlemen, whether, lawyers or law firms or otherwise.
So, you mentioned when we were talking about the role of the SEC, the sort of rural broadband and Starlink and the low orbit satellites, right? I guess the question is, Biden spent millions, billions probably, trying to connect rural America to the internet through this broadband initiative. As far as I can tell, it didn't really produce any results.
No, you're right. So this goes back, well over 1,000 days ago now, when President Biden and Vice President Harris announced their signature initiative to end the digital divide, to connect millions of Americans to high-speed internet. But over all of those 1,000 days, they had $42 billion were allocated for that effort. Not a single person was connected. Not even a single shovel's worth of dirt was turned. Now, the good news is most of that money is still sitting over at the Commerce Department, and Secretary Lutnick is over there now, and he's doing a fantastic job. That program is now under his purview, and he's sort of already announced some directional changes that he wants to make with that. In fact, funny enough, the outgoing head of the program left Commerce, a week or two ago, and he sent some public letter complaining about how the program isn't moving fast enough. And it just reminded me of that hot dog meme of, we're looking for the guy responsible for, going 1,000 days without getting anybody connected through that program. So I'm confident that Secretary Lutnick is going to make the right policy cuts there. And we're going to get this country going again. But your point, we were spending $100,000 or more in some cases per household under programs similar to that one that hadn't connected anybody. And yet we have this new technology that can do it for pennies on the dollar. So my view is, this is frankly Congress's view, we should be technology neutral. Let's do it in a way that's fast and efficient for the American public.
Yeah, I know you were down in Louisiana with Majority Leader Scalise talking about some of the satellite companies and things down there. Listen, I will plainly admit, I have a hard time turning on my own computer. My tech savviness extends to, like, when there's a problem, I just go, oh, maybe if I power down and power up, that'll fix it. But it seems to me that, like, spending a boatload of cash in rural America to connect, cables, to try to bring broadband to them, as opposed to using a low orbit satellite, would be the way to go, right? It's a lot cheaper. You have a higher latency. To me, that's where the future is, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, there's so many parts of this country where it does make sense to build out fiber or build out cable because of population density. But when you start getting out to these areas where it's, one person per square mile, or you have more, cattle than you do actual people, that's where you need a mix of technology. So actually 5G works there. It's a terrestrial Earth-based technology. To your point, there's satellite technologies that work well. In fact, even in, suburban and urban areas, you're getting mobile wireless providers that are now doing something called fixed wireless. It's effectively wirelessly trying to replicate a fiber connection to a house. And the mobile wireless guys, through that fixed wireless technology, are taking more market share, more newcomers in the in-home broadband market than traditional fiber and cable. So we want everyone to be able to compete. There's going to be tons of room and space for fiber and cable. But the last administration just put too much of a thumb on the scale against satellite technology. And I think that can only be explained by reference to Elon Musk and their particular hatred of him.
It seems to me that's right. I keep seeing like it's a lot cheaper, a lot better. I mean, even I had the chicks on the right were on the show on Monday, and I think it's Daisy gets all of her internet off of Starlink because of where she lives in Texas, and it's like it would seem silly, but that to me seems where we go. Now, will this technology help when we're on planes, for example? I know a lot of times people complain about the Wi-Fi on planes. Will this sort of satellite-based internet providing help when we're flying, things like in that space as well?
For sure, yeah. You see a lot more airplane fleets upgrading either from one satellite service to another satellite service, and it's going to definitely improve that. But one of the most interesting new trends here in satellite technologies, for years we had, satellite going directly to sort of your small little dish, including Starlink, which is sort of a dish that you can put near your house, or in fact, they have it now, you can put it in a backpack. And we've also had technology that goes right to a sort of a satellite phone. But we've got this new thing called direct-to-cell technology where right to your smartphone, you can get a signal directly from a satellite. There's different providers. Apple is aligned with Globalstar. T-Mobile is aligned with Starlink. There's lots of different providers now doing that. And that's a total game changer because that ends completely the concept of dead zones in the speed and technology that you're going to be able to get directly to your phone from a satellite in orbit is only going to improve and get better and faster. And so that's one of the most interesting technologies when you look forward.
It's funny, when I was on the plane the other day, I will admit, unless it's illegal, that I didn't turn my phone into airplane mode. And I'm at like 20,000 feet and I get this signal that shows up on my phone and it says, connect to the satellite in case people need to get in contact with you. And I was like, whoa, that was new to me, that this idea, it's saying, and so I assume if you get lost, it kept saying, find a clear area. And I'm like, I'm on a plane. I can't do that.
Yeah, don't stick your hand out the window in that circumstance.
I'm trying to roll it down. But this seems like a really cool advance in technology that now if you're out somewhere that these satellites are going to give people connectivity that they previously
phenomenal.
Wouldn't have had.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. You're looking at national parks where people get lost, hikers get lost. I mean, it's such a good additive to our existing terrestrial network. And that's why, we're really in this sort of entering this golden age of connectivity. So you've got all these fiber builds that are going out. You've got 5G and 6G rolling out. And this is something that President Trump, as has led on for a long time. Back to 2017, we had fallen way behind China on 5G and we were getting our butt kicked. And Trump said, I'm not going to, stand for that. And he kicked the agencies into gear. We freed up thousands of what we call megahertz, how you measure spectrum. And we took the leadership position. Now, unfortunately, in the Biden years, we fell behind once again. President Biden, not surprisingly, fell into a deep malaise when it came to leadership on next generation connectivity. And right now, there's a lot of great work in Congress. Chairman Cruz in the Senate is looking to restore the FCC's auction authority, because one way that we clear these airways into the commercial sector is by auctioning the spectrum. Our auction authority expired, but Chairman Cruz has been great on this. Leader Scalise yesterday, when I was in Louisiana with him, gave some very strong, great remarks on restoring spectrum authority. But we got to show some leadership again. And this is what President Trump is so good at, right? Biden, fell into this malaise, didn't clear spectrum, but Trump has been clear that we're going to lead the world when it comes to this next generation of technologies.
For the longest time, you and I have had this ongoing conversation about Section 230 and the protections that it gives internet companies and platforms, and whether or not they're a platform or a publisher, et cetera, et cetera. And then came along the Chevron decision in the Supreme Court and basically said, agencies, unless Congress gives you authority to do something, you can't just go out and do it. You can't legislate at the agency level. So how has that decision, if at all, affected Section 230 and the FCC's ability to address the concerns that a lot of us have about the scope and of technology platforms like Facebook and Google and what have you?
Yeah, it's not clear at all to me that that's going to end up, pinching the FCC's ability to move forward with issues of promoting free speech. As we've talked before, Section 230 is in the Communications Act. And so the FCC does have authority to interpret provisions within Section 230. And in a nutshell, again, 230 is what a lot of social media companies rely on to censor. They can censor within the scope of their First Amendment rights, whatever those are, but they also rely on these sort of bonus Section 230 rights. And as Justice Thomas has made clear, courts have read immunities into Section 230, effectively permission to censor, that Congress never intended. So I think the FCC can step in potentially here and clarify the meaning of Section 230 in a way that's going to promote more speech, a greater diversity of viewpoints, and lead to less censorship. I think that'd be really a good thing for the country.
One of the things that the Trump administration did right off the bat was go after DEI. And you guys seem to be tackling that within the confines of some of the companies like Comcast. What are you guys trying to get to with respect to DEI and some of these companies that are in your purview?
Yeah, one of the very first things that we did, following President Trump's lead, he came out of the box, effectively day one with an executive order ending the promotion of DEI across federal agencies. And we stepped right up at the FCC, and I ended immediately the FCC's own promotion of DEI. I mean, people would be shocked if they learned how much money was being spent at the FCC on promoting DEI. It was listed as our number 2 strategic priority was promoting DEI, rather than actually
what was number one? What was number one?
I know, rather than getting Americans connected or, the national networks, it was promoting DEI. We had, a DEI advisory group that was stood up. So we ended all of that. And we're also making sure that companies that are regulated by the FCC understand that, these invidious forms of DEI discrimination are nothing other than racism. It's something that for decades we understood in this country as to be prohibited, to discriminate people based on immutable characteristics. And, the FCC has rules in place that are equal employment opportunity, EEO rules. As we've launched a number of investigations or otherwise reached out to companies to make sure that they're ending all forms of invidious DEI discrimination as envisioned by the FCC's EEO rules. And we've made that clear to every company. So we've sent a letter to Comcast, we've sent a letter to Verizon, and we're continuing to engage with even more companies to make sure they shut it down.
Good. I'm glad you're doing that. That's awesome. Because again, I just can't believe, I remember looking at the list of priorities of the Department of Agriculture that's dealing with like the bird flu and all this. And their number one thing was, equality, inclusion. I'm like, no, dude, worry about the food supply, you morons. I do want to ask you though, as we, about AI, because you tweeted out that the U.S. will ensure that American AI technology continues to be the gold standard worldwide. Obviously, China is trying to get into this space too. What do we need to know about where we are as a government in terms of AI and its development?
Yeah, the world is really at a fork in the road when it comes to AI, which is obviously this is going to be amazing new technology with tremendous upside potential. China has made very clear that they want to try to catch up to the U.S. and they want to try to dominate in AI, but they're also been very clear that it will be an ideologically biased AI, it'll be authoritarian AI. I mean, heck, just ask DeepSeek what happened in Tiananmen Square, and they'll say it was a lovely day. Ask them what happened to the Uyghurs, and they say they're fine. They're just getting some additional education in some camps. And so there's a real fork in the road of, do we want this sort of this version of Chinese AI, authoritarian AI, to dominate, or do we want the U.S. to continue to be the world's leader with gold standard AI? And Vice President Vance and President Trump himself have been very clear that the U.S. is going to lead the world in AI. It's going to be free from ideological bias. We've got the full stack, from the energy that we need, from the software that we need, from the data centers that we need. But we also don't necessarily have to go it alone. And so I went recently on my first international trip to Europe and spoke with my counterparts there and was welcoming them to join the U.S. on our path to world-leading AI. And the reality is Europe is in a bit of a bind right now. They don't have the economic output that they need to compete. They are over-regulated in terms of their companies. They can't get to the scale that they need. And again, they're welcome to join us, but they can't be imposing ideological bias. And there's some concern. There's some regulations in Europe called the DSA, the Digital Services Act, that effectively is compelling social media companies to censor free speech. That's incompatible with our free speech tradition. It's incompatible with the commitments that U.S. technology companies have made. And we're going to stand up for those businesses to make sure that there's not discrimination by Europe against them simply because they're U.S. companies.
Chairman, before you go, the last thing I want to ask you is, I can't go up, look over the edge of a one-story building and look down, and I see these videos that you put out there climbing towers. I mean, I don't know if you're just trying to show off, but I got to be honest with you, I get scared watching the videos of you doing this. What is it? What do you... do you just love doing this? Are you a thrill seeker? Do you want to check the technology? Aren't there people below the chairman of the FCC that can climb the tower? Because or are you just trying to give Elon Musk one more thing that you did this week? Because it scares the heck out of me when I watch you climb these towers.
Yeah, I love doing that. I mean, look, so many people sort of sit in DC and they don't really understand, how is this thing that you regulate, these technologies, actually built? So one of the things I try to do is spend as little time inside the Beltway as possible and spend time with the men and women that actually build out this internet infrastructure. And that's involved getting up a lot of towers. So as you indicated, I was recently down in Alabama, was on top of a 2,000-foot broadcast tower with a crew. And yeah, you're looking down, you're seeing the clouds below you moving underneath of you. And yeah, it's a nerve-wracking experience to be sure. But I just gotta you don't let the invasive thoughts win. You gotta focus on the thing right in front of you, and just love the opportunity to spend time with those people. I mean, they're just the best.
I love spending. No. Hold on. I love spending time with people.
You just want to do it on the ground.
But I want to do it on the ground. How many towers have you climbed?
In terms of big towers, the 2,000 footers, that's the 4th I've done. In terms of all towers, probably over 30 or 40 at this point. But the big tower stuff is the real rush. That's a lot of fun.
And just to put a pin in this, have you always enjoyed climbing high? Or did this come with the job?
It's funny. It's sort of in my blood, I guess. I was looking back at our own family history. Irish immigrants came back to New York in the early 1900s, and they were building some of the skyscrapers back then. And I didn't know that at first, but maybe that explains why I don't mind sort of getting up there high with the tower workers.
Okay. Well, I'll let you do it, but I hope that you have a team with a chute below you, because I get scared watching the video for you.
Well,
but I appreciate it.
It's funny because you have to have a whole safety briefing on the front end. I went through it. It was fine. And after the climb was over, they said, hey, by the way, we had this other safety briefing. I'm like, yeah, no, I was in the safety briefing. Like, no. Before you got here, there was a whole other safety briefing. If you freaked out, if you froze up, they told me this. They said, we were going to hog tie you and then sort of rope rappel you down. And I'm like, thank goodness I didn't freak out, because I didn't know there was a hog tie contingency plan for me if I needed it.
Dude, you got to get you down somehow. So I'm glad that you pulled it off. Chairman Brendan Carr, thank you as always for bringing so much insight into what's going on. I appreciate your time.
Enjoy it. Great to be with you. Thanks.
Thanks, man. Thanks for listening to us, guys. What a great show. We've got a big week ahead for you, keeping an eye on all of these court cases, all the back and forth with the Trump administration. Stay with us all week long. Hit that notification and subscribe button. I've got a great newsletter on the media and these dinners and the news that Caroline broke the other day on the show. Go to SeanSpicer.com. Sign up now. It is free. Get on the newsletter. Check out the columns that I write. If you want to be a VIP member, you're more than welcome to. But go to SeanSpicer.com to sign up. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you back here tomorrow on The Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.